Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. It is my prayer that the content that you're about to enjoy adds value to your life. If you like it, please let us know by hitting that like button. Also, we'd love to connect with you, so please leave a comment below letting us know your thoughts. If you know someone who will enjoy this content, make sure to share it with them. For more content like this, subscribe to our channel and hit the notifications bell so that you never miss when we post something new. Don't forget to check out the video description for links to more information and other resources. May God bless you.
It's great to be here with you this morning. We continue our journey through the book of Ruth. And by the way, if you enjoy listening to the choir, let me tell you, it's a lot more fun to sing in the choir. And you can just show up Wednesday nights at 7 o'clock. We have our rehearsals in the fellowship hall, and you can join us and learn. And let me tell you, for me personally, it's a blessing to spend about an hour each week singing and praising and worshiping and learning how to do it better under the direction of G. So you're invited to join the choir. We are on this journey. Love is the title of the series on the book of Ruth. And I say the word love, but really it's the Hebrew word chesed, which we don't have an equivalent for in English. It means lots of different things as we have been discovering through the story. But I believe that love is a word that encompasses it the best. We've covered two topics so far, chapters 1 and 2 of Ruth. If you missed those, they're available online. I have blog posts on those with notes on them. And today we are on the third one, Blessed are you. Here's a quote that I'd love to begin with. It says, no one, this is something for us to pay attention to, no one in the book of Ruth demands of God that he meet his or her needs. And no one demands specific miraculous divine intervention on his or her own behalf. On the contrary, true covenant faith is expressed by concern for the welfare of others. In the story, this concern is expressed by loving actions that promote the next person's well-being and by verbal expressions of prayer for the next person. At the same time, it is striking that no one in the book prays for a resolution of his own crisis. In each case, a person prays that the Lord would bless someone else. This is a mark of chesed. So it's not that it's wrong for you to pray for yourself. It's not wrong. It's just this book really highlights how each person is going through a struggle, yet they seem more concerned with what the other person needs. And as different people are in a relationship and each one is praying for the other, everyone receives a blessing. So it's this radical notion of love and what it can look like in an environment, in an atmosphere, in a culture of chesed, in a culture of love. Another text that we have been keeping in mind as we go through this story is Romans 8:28. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. We're letting this just sit in the back of our mind as we have been going through the story in the book of Ruth. And we're in part 3, Blessed are you. However, if you are watching us online, if you are listening to this later on in your car as a podcast, I just want to give you a heads up. We are going to touch on some themes here regarding marriage, sexuality. It's not going to be heavy on that, but we are touching on that, so just be aware. I'm really glad that it worked out that this Sabbath we are having our first ever children's church. So all the children are in the fellowship hall, and I feel a little bit more free to talk about some of these topics. I know there are still children here. I'm not going to be super explicit, but it is going to come up in this conversation. We have Ruth. We have Boaz. They've been around each other for a little bit. We're kind of hoping for romance to happen, and it has not happened. Boaz has not made a move. And it got me thinking about when Vanessa and I were dating. Oh yes, back in the day, I had longer hair, and I remember before we started dating, and there were several guys that were interested in Vanessa. And I was like, no, I want Vanessa to be my girlfriend. So when I asked her out, it was at her mom's house. It was potluck. It was right after church. She lived in a townhouse. I think it was like 2 bedrooms and like this small, tight space. We had like 40 people in there all together to eat. And I made sure to, well, first I wanted to make sure she was going to say yes. Then I asked her father for permission in front of everybody, because I felt like it would be harder for him to say no if there's witnesses. So I asked, do I have permission to date Vanessa, your daughter? And everybody went, "Aw," and I thought, yes. Like, he can't say no now. And I'm very happy that she said yes. 7 years later, we got married. It was a long, we started dating, we were like both kids. We raised each other. And then we got married. But it took that initiative, right? That commitments. Like, I want you to be my girlfriend. I want people to know that you're my girlfriend, so all the other guys will cease and desist. And I just tried to hold on to her for all these years, and so far, so good. So we're waiting for romance in this story between Ruth and, like, when is it going to happen? Is there going to be some romance? Isn't this a love story? All we've been talking about is just these struggles that they've been going through. And isn't it odd that when we think about romance, we want to remove the struggle? But I find in real life and in the story of Ruth that romance and love happen in the context of struggle. It's not in the absence of struggle. The trick is figuring out how to keep the relationship going when everything else seems to be falling apart. And this is that principle of chesed, of dedication to one another, praying for one another, wanting to bless the other person. And this works best when both people are dedicated to the same degree to each other. And that only happens with God at the center. Otherwise, we are selfish and we want the other to earn our love. We want them to deserve our good behavior towards them, and that leads to relationships struggling and falling apart. It's hard. It's not easy. But since you're here this morning, I figured I'd challenge you with the story, and this is also how I challenge myself in my marriage. Let's get into the text. Ruth chapter 3, verse 1. If you have your Bibles, open your Bibles. We can look through this together and study it, and that way you can mark and make notes and look at it. Ruth chapter 3, starting with verse 1. It says, "Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, 'My daughter, shall I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you?'" So far in the story, we have had Ruth gleaning, working hard. She gets up early in the morning, works all day, comes back in the evening. She's been collecting grain. She's been gleaning. She has been providing for both her and her mother-in-law. Now her mother-in-law says, "Now it's my turn to provide security for you." By the way, I do have a blog post that goes with this. There's a lot more notes on there. I'm not going to cover everything on here, but this word security, it's really interesting. It echoes of Ruth chapter 1, verses 8 through 9, when she says, "Don't follow me to Israel," to her daughters-in-law, "Stay here, and I pray that the Lord will provide peace for you in the home of her husband." And rest, peace, security, these are similar words, and this illustrates the security and tranquility that a woman in ancient Israel longed for and expected to find in the home of a loving husband. So, according to this text, and according to these prayers of blessing from Naomi to Ruth, the women long for and desire rest and security and peace. And the idea seems to be in this narrative that they would find that in the home of their husbands. And this got me thinking about this idea of under the wings. We talked about this last week. And and I came across this quote, I paraphrase it here. A godly husband functions as the wings of God, offering protection and security to all who dwell in his house. That's the spouse, that's the children, that's whoever else happens to be in the house. And this got me thinking. And this is a side note, so it's not directly related to the sermon. I think it's related. You let me know afterwards. Working as a youth pastor, working with young adults for many years, I got to do plenty of premarital counseling and talk with people who are thinking about dating, they're thinking about marriage, they're wondering whether to stay together or to break up. So lots of these types of conversations with young people. And there's one trait that I saw, and you probably have witnessed this too, we're all in the same society. There were several men that would either start coming to church, a lot of times it was their girlfriend or their wife that was coming to church and they weren't too interested. And there were several men that seemed to think, as I talked with them, they wouldn't say this out loud, but as we talked about reasons to marry or not get married and to stay together or not, I got the notion that a lot of males, I don't know if I want to call them men, but they think that the key to a happy relationship is to keep the woman, to keep the other, the significant other, insecure. Because as long as they're insecure, they're going to try to earn your favor. They're going to want to please you. And then if you give them security, well, what if they don't treat you nicely anymore? So in that, because they're insecure, they feel like if they keep their significant other insecure, that's the happiest possible relationship that they can have. And marriage would ruin that with the whole life commitment thing. Like, once I commit, then what if she, stops doing the things that I like, and then now I have nothing. And I was like, okay, this can't be healthy. This is not the way it's supposed to be. But they're afraid of going all in. They're afraid of committing. And then what happens to me, right? Our selfishness, or perhaps because in our lifetime, perhaps we have never experienced a healthy type of love, this biblical chesed, this dedication to your well-being, because you never received it from your parents, from grandparents, from family. You've always been on your own. You've been betrayed before. Now you're afraid. And then what happens? What happens is we come to God, and God challenges us to live differently in light of His Word, in light of His love for us. He says, I want you to start loving others in a way that's dangerous, in a way that you're putting yourself out there for the benefit of the other. Now, the good news is you don't have to get married. And it's true. If you're single and happy, God bless you. You have a mission. There's wonderful things that you can do. If you want to get married, God bless you. There's also a mission, and there's wonderful things that you can do. What you can't do is the halfway point. You can be happily single, and you can be happily married. But if you do it halfway, both of you will be miserable. And so will the children. There is a struggle, and I'm not saying this is easy, and it's complex. What I'm saying is the best possible outcome, if you want to give this the best shot possible, is for both of you to be fully invested in it. Both of you fully dedicated to the other. And if you haven't found someone that you feel comfortable being fully dedicated to, okay, don't. But don't do it halfway. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying that, I'm saying it's the best possible way. If you want to make it work, you have to go all in. Exclusive, lifelong commitment to the other. That is what I see as God's plan. That is what I see as chesed in this story. And it is a tall order. It is difficult. It may seem impossible. And I would say without God at the center of it, it is impossible. It's a recipe for abuse. It's a recipe for you to get taken advantage of. It's a recipe for a miserable life. But with God at the center of it, it's the best possible life, because our joy and our meaning comes from a dedication to something that's worthwhile. God first of all. And second, to those of us who are married, it's our spouse and it's our family. Find your joy in the dedication, in the mission, in the commitment, not in what you're going to get from it. And you will receive blessings from it in unexpected ways, but they will come from God, not from you manipulating the other person. So, heavy. There is a lot, but let's continue. There's a quote from a Bible scholar on this topic that I think that this is really interesting. He's mentioning here Ruth and Naomi, her mother-in-law. But it almost sounds like a couple, and I think it would work for a couple also. But for these two ladies, as in any healthy covenant relationship, these are two people who have committed themselves to the other's good above their own. What does that mean? Ruth decided to stick with Naomi, even though this would lower her chances of finding a husband. If she stayed in her own land, with her own family, with her own people, she would be more likely to find a husband than going to a foreign land, to a different people, with your mother-in-law, who's also a widow. She chose her mother-in-law to provide for her, to be there for her, to glean and bring the food home. So she's dedicated to her mother-in-law. And now her mother-in-law says, no, I want to help provide peace and rest and a safe place for you. These two ladies, not a romantic relationship, these two ladies are giving us a picture of love, which is what? Two people dedicated to the well-being of each other. Imagine a community like that, and you have the early church in the book of Acts. It's no wonder that people wanted to be a part of it. Not because it was easy to be a Christian, but because now you belong to a community where people are dedicated to helping each other. And as we do that here in Cloverdale, as we do that as Christians living here right now, as difficult as life is, we start to get an idea of what the kingdom of God is all about. That commitment towards the other. Now it is dangerous. Love is not easy. It's not safe. But it is worthwhile. So let's continue with the story and see what is going on. Let's go to verse 2. It says, now Boaz, whose young women you were with, is he not our relative? In fact, he is doing what? He's winnowing barley. Here we go. He's winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Now, I looked this up in one of the commentaries, and barley was typically threshed at the onset of the dry season, so late May to June. After all the grain, both barley and wheat, was cut and gathered, the best threshing floors involved rock outcrops on hilltops. The hard surface was needed to keep the grain free of dirt and to facilitate the sweeping of the grain at the end of the day. The hilltop location was required to take advantage of the wind that would blow away the chaff when the threshed grain was tossed in the air with a fork, allowing the separated heavier kernels of grain to fall to the floor. And this threshing floor was probably located in or near the field where Ruth had been gleaning. Some distance from the town of Bethlehem, Boaz chose to do this winnowing at night, presumably because the night breezes were more desirable than the gusty winds in the daytime. So this is the setting. They're probably on top of a hill, rock outcrop. They're winnowing the grain. They're probably doing this at night or later in the day. And then we have a plan. Now, this plan is interesting. We're going to spend some time talking about the plan, and then we're going to pick up the speed a little bit after. So we are going to spend some time here trying to understand this plan, seeing the challenges with this plan, and it's a complex plan. Let's look at it together. Ruth chapter 3, verses 3 and 4, it says the following. Therefore, wash yourself and anoint yourself, put on your best garments, go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. Then it shall be, when he lies down, that you shall notice the place where he lies, and you shall go in, uncover his feet, and lie down, and he will tell you what you should do. And I wonder if Ruth was like, wait, what? Like, run that by me again? Like, shouldn't I just go over and talk to the guy? Like, are you sure this is the best plan? It's a little complicated. Like, can we go over this again in smaller steps? And it's like, sure, it's simple. Number one, right? You want to wash yourself and put on the dress. Number two, you wait until he's done eating. This is great advice. Number three, you notice where he goes to sleep. It would be awkward to wake up the wrong guy. Number four, like, but what's with number four? Like, what are you thinking? Like, why Why uncover? So anyway, let me go through this in a little bit more detail. And I had way too much fun researching this, and now you get to sit there and listen to what I discovered. So here's the thing. The first one, it makes sense, right? It's simple enough. She's been working hard all week. I'm not sure how often they showered back then in that part of the world. But, take a bath, wash. I don't have to explain this one very much. Second one is apply perfume. Well, once again, deodorants haven't been invented yet. This was like perfume. This was most likely perfumed olive oil. And, hot weather, she's going to smell nice. Third, put on a dress. Now, this is interesting. In your Bibles, the word best is probably italicized, which means that it's not there in the original language. Now, it's not wrong for the translator to add a word here and there to help it make sense in English. But this, whenever it's italicized, it usually means in the original text, the word is not there. Now, there's debate on this, and the word used there, and I go into more details of this in my blog, it seems to mean a cloak, a heavier garment that would be able to keep her warm at night. And when we look at the plot, this seems to fit. There is another interpretation that is your best garment, and there are some who will interpret this to be a seductive outfit, right? You're gonna shower, wear something seductive, put on perfume, and then go run into this guy. I would argue against that approach because it's night, it's dark. He's not really gonna notice how pretty your dress is. And once again, when we look at when she actually goes to act this out, it seems like the heavier cloak to keep her warm at night makes more sense. And on my blog, there's more details and links to the original Hebrew and all that for those of you who want to really dive in deep. So another support for what I would say my interpretation of this is Exodus 22:25 through 26. Poor people use this garment, the same word it's used there, for a blanket at night. Since Ruth was a poor person going to spend the night in the field, she will have needed of this blanket to keep warm. In the Exodus, I think it's talking about the context of borrowing things and make sure you return the cloak to the person so that they're not without it for the night. There's another interpretation of this put on your best dress or, put on this cloak. And I also like this interpretation. And this is a reference, they reference 2 Samuel 12:20, which is when David was in sackcloth and ashes praying for his son with Bathsheba, who was sick and about to die. And then the son dies. And then it says that David went, washed, anointed himself, and put on fresh clothes, which seems to be the same series that's used here between Naomi, giving Ruth these instructions. And this would indicate that it was likely that Ruth has been wearing her widowhood garments all along. Because her husband died, she could be wearing something that represents mourning or represent that she's a widow all this time. And now her mother-in-law is saying, okay, time to change back to normal clothes. Time to signal, to let people know that you're back to living life, open to being married, right? Open to moving on, moving beyond the loss of your husband. I feel like this helps explain also why Boaz has not made a move. Right? He hasn't made a move. All this time has gone by. It's the end of the harvest. Why hasn't he done anything? Now Ruth has to do this thing. If only Boaz had the courage to step up and ask her out. But maybe it could be that she's wearing the garments of widowhood and he felt like it was inappropriate to make a move. Like, not yet. So keep this in the back of your mind. So Ruth is trying to understand Naomi's plan. And okay, so here's the fourth part. Go to the threshing floor where Boaz will spend the night. Now, question, why would a wealthy, respectable man like Boaz spend the night in the threshing floor? We could think about this. There's a couple of possibilities. One of them, we see that Boaz earlier in chapter 2 joins his working men for lunch. It seems like he wants to be with them, get to know them, spend time with them. Then they eat together. So it seems like his style of leadership is to be with the men who are working. Also, this is the end of the harvest. It's a little bit of a celebration. All the hard work throughout the year, the planting, the sowing, preparing, the reaping, now they get to enjoy. It's kind of like the shearing of the sheep and in the stories of David later on, this would be a similar event, the winnowing of the harvest. So it's a celebration. They're getting to see, the benefit of all their hard work, the fruits of their labor, right? It's like a pile of money. And he's going out there, and there's a couple of reasons. One, you want to sleep with the grain so that nobody gets any ideas in the middle of the night to come and take away your grain. Also, keep it away from animals who might get interested in your grain. So the men would be outside, they would work all day, and they would sleep and be there by the grain until they can put it all away and have it taken care of. And Boaz is there with the men, enjoying their company, working together. It's a bonding experience, and it just seems to back the idea or support the idea that Boaz is a good leader, a hardworking man, an example for others. So the idea of Ruth going out there is problematic. One of them is that there's some cultural evidence that during this time, so think through this with me and tell me if it makes sense. Because as much as I love the Bible commentaries and resources regarding the history and the culture, remember, those are not inspired. They should help us understand the Bible, but we read them thinking through, and we can accept or reject what they say. So think through this with me and let me know if you think it makes sense. The cultural aspect goes as follows. You have a bunch of men working hard. They've been working hard all season. This is like the busy time of the year. Now it's getting to the end of that. So they're getting the fruit of their labor. They're feeling better. They're essentially sleeping next to the pile of money, which is the grain. They've worked hard. They're outside the town, away from their families. It's dark. They worked hard all day. They're sitting next to a pile of cash. They say it's likely that women would go out there and get some money. They would go out there, and this would be, something along the lines of prostitution. And it would happen. It's sort of like people knew it was happening, but people could kind of like turn a blind eye to it like it didn't happen. But this was something that supposedly would happen. And some people would see this plan as going along those lines. Hey, he's going to be out there away from everybody. It's dark. Nobody can see. There is money. He's tired. He's feeling good. This would be a good time, a way for you to take advantage of this situation. And there is debate among scholars whether this was the plan or not. I would say it's not. And I'll make my point more clearly towards the end. I'll let you think through this for yourself. Is it dangerous, the idea of Ruth being showered and perfumed and wearing her best dress, as someone interpreted, going out there in the middle of the night to a guy that's sitting next to his pile of cash and, just laying next to him? It just sounds like a weird plan. Like, if I would not give that advice to a young lady from our church, right? Like, oh, you're trying to get this man? Well, let me tell you what, you're going to wait until he's done eating. Never talk to a hungry man. It does not go well. And then it's the type of thing that people are like, I'm not sure about Naomi and this plan. But let's talk about it a little bit more. Fifth aspect of this plan, it's important that Ruth remains out of sight, to carefully observe where Boaz will lie down to sleep. Can you imagine approaching the wrong guy? You uncover his feet and you're like, oh wait, no, the plan. So make sure you're watching. So she's far enough that she can't be seen, but close enough that she can see what's going on. 6, also uncover Boaz's lower limbs. It's if you're gonna go word by word translation. And this is a problem. The feet in the Bible get translated in different ways. There's different words in Hebrew for feet. The one that's used as a euphemism is usually a different word, but the word that's used here, it's still a reference to feet that sometimes refers to, the genitalia. And there's debate that whether this is what Naomi had in mind or not. I would argue that it's not, because she is described by the narrator throughout the story as a respectable woman. So for the plan to go completely against that, or for the plan to be interpreted in light of that, I think you're discounting all the work the narrator has been doing so far in telling this story. He's painting a picture of Ruth and Naomi And to take that interpretation, which some Bible scholars do, I think is to disregard the rest of the evidence in the text. But grammatically, it's possible. From the words being used, from the way that she's describing the plan, it could be taken the wrong way if we didn't have all of this context. So here's another quote that I found. This interpretation is rendered all the more attractive by the fact that this is about, this being a risky sexual type of approach. This interpretation is rendered all the more attractive by the fact that each of the three Hebrew words that make up this sentence is capable of more than one meaning. Each is capable of bearing an overtly sexual meaning. First, the root to uncover is often used in sexual context of uncovering someone's nakedness, a euphemism for exposing genitals, or uncovering someone's skirt. And then the word to uncover, the word for foot, and then the word to lie down is also, all of these words can be used in a sexual context. To lie down, to uncover, and the word for feet. So we're in trouble. And she's, thinking about this plan. And there is that sexual possible interpretation of the plan. But if we were to follow, let's say, okay, maybe I'm just, because of my, Eurocentric view and approach to this, I don't want to think about it sexually, and then it's just my personal view. Maybe it is, right? My personal bias is shaping the way that I interpret the text. Well, let's look at the context. How has Boaz been described? An honorable man. How would an honorable man react to a woman showing up offering favors that he didn't ask for? This could cause the whole thing to fall apart. If he had some respect for Ruth, some admiration, and then she shows up in this way, behaving like a prostitute, this may cause him to just reject her altogether. This is why I think the plan would be incredibly flawed if this was Naomi's way of thinking through. If this was the goal, I think it would end up doing more harm than good. So I'm in favor of the PG interpretation of the plan, because I think it fits with the narrative and the character of those being described, Ruth, Boaz, and Naomi. So the last part of the plan is for Ruth to wait for Boaz to give her further instructions. So this reveals Naomi's confidence that Boaz will do the right thing. This could also be a sign of Naomi placing this in God's hands and say, well, you do this and then see what happens. See what comes as a result. And this is tricky. It says to wait for when Boaz is done eating and drinking. As an Adventist, I want to say he was not drinking alcoholic drinks. But the biblical text is not clear. It could be. It could not. What if he is drinking something alcoholic? How would a man getting woken up in the middle of the night, his feet are uncovered, there's a woman there, he's a little bit tipsy, how would he react? Would this ruin everything? There's so many different ways that this plan could go wrong. That a perfumed woman showing up in the middle of the night to this guy, it could just go the wrong way. What do we do with this text? Here's a nice way that one Bible scholar put it. What are the chances that Boaz will wake up and in his groggy state notice that Ruth has covered herself with simila, and this is a reference to the dress, rather than a seductive garb of a prostitute, that he will understand when she introduces herself, that he will respond favorably towards her, overlooking the irregularities of the situation, a woman proposing to a man, a young person proposing to an older person, a field worker proposing to a field owner, an alien proposing to a native. Do you see all the issues that she has to deal with? Do you see all the ways that this could go wrong? And that, in fulfillment of Naomi's words, he will give Ruth a rational instructions concerning how to proceed. By this time, Naomi's faith is strong, and she has confidence in Boaz's integrity, and apparently in the hidden hand of God to govern his reactions when he awakes. I go through all of these steps because I want you to slow down and think about how risky this is. Because there is a tendency to read through the book of Ruth and say, God's not there. Like, where is, like, it's not obvious. But when you consider all the things that have to go just right for this to work? For this to work, it has to be a miracle. And this is how we see the hand of God in it. And this is part of the struggle when we're living our lives, because it's not always obvious what God is doing. We sort of trust God and show up and hope that He's in the process, in the details, helping things line up just right so that these coincidences happen. So how will Ruth respond? Verse 5, to my surprise, and she said to her, all that you say to me, I will do. Ruth actually agrees with Naomi's crazy plan. Yeah, it sounds good. What's the worst that could happen, right? Let's give this a try. So here's the thing. This is their plan. This is their one shot at finding peace and support and provision and help and rest. Otherwise, these two women are still widows with no sure source of income, with no protection, no representation. They're all alone, and it's not looking good. This is their one shot, and Ruth says, yeah, I'll do it. So let's get to the story. And I like to describe Ruth in this as a sweet-smelling ninja who's going to try to pull off this plan. Let's read verse 6. It says, so she went down to the threshing floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law instructed her. After Boaz had eaten and drunk and his heart was cheerful, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. And she came softly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. She goes there very quietly. She finds out where he's sleeping. She goes up to him. Apparently everybody else is asleep. They're really tired. I wonder if there was a fire there. Maybe the fire is dying down. Nobody's adding any fresh wood to it. She walks up to him. She uncovers his feet and she waits. And he doesn't wake up. She's like, was this part of the plan? Is he supposed to wake up? I imagine her just practicing what she's going to say and nothing happens. She's like, I'll go to sleep. And she lays down. Now, the Bible doesn't say that she lays down by his feet. She lays down somewhere close by. And then, when we continue the verses, we find out what happens at midnight. Verse 8, now it happened at midnight, or in the original Hebrew, in the middle of the night, or the darkest part of the night, that the man was startled. And this could be that he shivered, like it got cold. There was a cold breeze, his feet are uncovered, he got cold. Something wakes him up. And he turned himself, and behold, there is a woman lying at his feet. Like, oh, that's odd. Like, was she here? When did this happen? So he wakes up. Now, what is going to happen? If you're reading this story for the very first time, like you're not even breathing right now, like, oh, what's he gonna say? What's he gonna do? What's going to happen? Does the plan work? Or does he reject her? And now she's ruined forever. Like, what's going to happen? So now we have Boaz's response. Verse 10, it says, then he said, blessed are you of the Lord, my daughter, for you have shown me more chesed at the end than at the beginning, in that you did not go after young men, whether poor or rich. I'm going to stop there for a little bit. Boaz wakes up with a blessing on his lips. This is the kind of man that he is. This is why I interpret the plan in the PG version. It fits with the story. It fits with the character. It fits with the way things are flowing. She was not wearing a revealing, seductive dress. She was wearing something to keep her warm because she was sleeping out there. It was cold enough that he shivered and woke up because his feet were uncovered. He did not get the feeling that she was doing anything illicit or immoral. Actually, he blesses her for showing love, chesed, faithfulness, and kindness, not only towards his mother-in-law, which reminds us of his first greeting when back in chapter 2, when he meets her. Rather, he's saying, you're showing chesed towards me, which is surprising. So he's saying she did not go after younger men, she did not go after rich men, or poor man, and I mean, he's rich and he's not that old. He's young enough and strong enough to work in the field to thresh the wheat. I think what he's referencing here is that Ruth did not go around from farm to farm to find out who's the richest guy, who's the youngest guy, who's the best looking guy. She stuck with him, the family member, the close relative. And she's been faithful to her mother-in-law. She's been faithful or, present, consistent there with him. And then he says the following, verse 11. Sorry, I skipped something. Verse 9. When he wakes up, he said, "Who are you?" Which is much better than the first time he interacts with her. He asks, "Who does she belong to?" So he's doing better, right? There's character growth here with Boaz. "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your maidservant. Take your maidservant under your wing, for you are a close relative." This is the part that I had skipped. You are a close relative. She is essentially proposing to him. Here we have a strong woman who is clear. She has a plan. She shows up. He's been dragging his feet. She proposes to him. That's a story in the Bible. People ask, is it okay for a woman to propose? Culturally, we don't do it, but here there's a whole book named after her, and she proposed like, "Hey, so what do you think? Should we get married?" And the beautiful thing here is that he blesses her after she has this interaction. When she proposes to him, and here's an insight from a commentator that I appreciated. How is it that being awakened at midnight in the most unusual and compromising situation, he, referencing Boaz here, he knows exactly what Ruth has meant by her veiled speech and her comment, and he commends her for it. These are hardly the flippant words of one who has been seduced by a woman of the night. Again, the reader is inclined to see the hidden hand of God guiding not only the actions of individuals, but their reactions and their dispositions, so that in the end, the Lord's agenda is fulfilled. Boaz's words have the ring of divine inspiration. This is happening during the period of the Judges. There's all kinds of terrible things happening in Israel. And here we see a man that is led by the Spirit of God. And when he wakes up, God has to be in this. Because who wakes up at midnight because somebody uncovered their feet and they bless them as they're like, "What are you doing? Why are you bothering me? Leave me alone. Can't we talk in the morning? Can this wait?" No, there's so many ways this could have gone wrong. But he blesses her, and he understood exactly what she was asking him to do, that this was an honorable thing, that this was part of God's plan. And he mentions chesed. The issue revolves around Ruth's use of the word goel, and this is the kinsman redeemer. This is when she says that he is a close relative. That's the Hebrew word. There's more on that on my blog. Ruth's primary demand is simply that he marry her. But Boaz knows as soon as she utters this word that the stakes are higher, and that this is what triggers his interpretation of her words as an act of chesed. They represent kindness and grace for the benefit of somebody else. This would also be beneficial for her mother-in-law. This would be beneficial for the family line of her deceased father-in-law and of her deceased husband. This is actually a fulfillment of what Moses' laws provide. I say Moses' law because that's how it's referred to. I believe it was God's law. He spoke it through Moses. But anyway, this is part of God's plan. So he sees this as a sign of love. And so this is exciting. The plan is working. They're going to get married. And then verse 11, I love this. It says, "And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you request." This is amazing. We have the man who's the owner of the field, a wealthy, powerful, influential man, and he's saying to this widow, who's also a foreigner, who is a woman, he's saying, "I will do what you want me to do." He is placing himself at her service, a servant's attitude toward this woman who would never have that claim, but he freely chooses to do this as a sign of love, of chesed towards her. And he says, "I will do all that you request, For all the people of my town know that you are what? A woman of virtue. It's not because who she's married to, who she's related to. It's not because of political maneuverings. It's not because of seduction. It's not because she was manipulating and playing games. It's because she is a woman of character. Her life, living dedicated to her mother-in-law and working hard and doing her part, people are observing, and the way that she lives her life is a testimony to her character. And this is what motivates his reply and his response. It's not because she's so beautiful. And it seems like a lot of stories with women at the center of it, they always focus on their appearance. And it's not to say that appearance doesn't matter. It's just not the focus of the story. It's her character, the way that she behaves, the choices that she makes, the way that she conducts herself. And he says, everybody knows that you are a virtuous woman. Now, maybe you wonder, Pastor, if there's these beautiful stories about women in the Bible, how come it seems like everybody knows the story of all the men and nobody talks about the story of the women? And there are several, and we might at some point do a series just on the women of the Bible. I have a theory about this. I shared this with my Sabbath school class. It's really hard to clean up the story with women at the center and make it child-friendly. The stories with women at the center tend to be very messy. There's several of them in the Bible, but they always make us feel a little bit awkward. And they're never straightforward. And maybe this is the reason why we shy away from these stories. And as a result, people think there's no strong, women who are who are like inspiring and good role models. We just kind of avoid those stories. So maybe our daughters and our church members and society in general think that God has something against women or the Bible. No, not so. I think maybe we just rush over. We don't pay attention. This is a wonderful story, and Ruth is always described in a positive way. And he's saying everybody knows that you are a virtuous woman. Now, verse 12, he says, it is true that I am a close relative. However, there is a relative closer than I. You're like, no, come on. After all this, the whole plan and the thing and that night, and it's like we're so ready for this wedding and for the marriage to take place, and now there's a closer relative. I think this tells us something about Boaz. Boaz has not made a move. He has not, asked her to marry him. He has not approached her in any way. And this is why I think the garment thing might be a key to this. Maybe she was wearing widowhood garments. But I think he was thinking about it because he did his homework. He went down to City Hall and was like, okay, let me see the records of the families. Like, there's somebody that's a little bit closer, right? He was thinking through this. He's ready for this. It's been on his mind. He realized, technically, if you follow the genealogy, there's one dude that's a little bit closer than me. And I wonder if Ruth was like, oh, come on, really? After all this, you know how difficult this night was? I could barely sleep trying to think how this was going to go. And finally, everything is falling into place. But there's a possibility of someone that's closer than I. Well, let's finish this. Verse 13, stay this night, and in the morning it shall be that he will perform, stay this night, and in the morning it shall be that if he will perform the duty of a close relative for you, good, let him do it. But if he does not want to perform the duty for you, then I will perform the duty for you. So he says, for sure, maybe, right? As the Lord lives, lie down until morning. I mean, she probably laid down. I doubt she slept a wink after this. Like, wait, I might have to marry some other guy after all this? But I like you. I don't want some other guy. And I wonder if he's laying down there too, just thinking like, okay, this other guy, how is this going to go? How do I talk to him? What should I say? And just thinking through this. So they're both there. So she lay at his feet until morning, and she arose before one could recognize another. Then he said, do not let it be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. Right? This could look bad. There's issues with this plan. It's very risky. Also, he said, bring the shawl that is on your head and hold it. So that she held it, and he measured 6 ephahs of barley and laid it on her. Then she went into the city. This is probably 6 like scoops with 2 hands. Anyway, I went down a rabbit hole on that. It's not worth it. So, enough for her to take home and be happy with, and for her mother-in-law to have something to eat. And he is concerned about her reputation, which once again indicates that there was nothing inappropriate about the plan and the approach, but it could be taken that way, so he's having her leave before that happens. Verse 15, at the end of verse 15 says, then she went into the city. Actually, it's more likely that the text says, and he went into the city. It's not super clear, but we believe that he's the one that's in a hurry to make it to the city because he has some business to take care of. So finishing out the chapter, then she came to her mother-in-law and she said, is that you, my daughter? And she told her all that the men had done for her. And she said, these 6 ephahs of barley he gave me, for he said, do not go empty-handed to your mother-in-law. Then she said, sit still, my daughter, until you know how the matter will turn out. For the man will not rest until he has concluded the matter this day. I imagine Naomi smiling. The plan worked. I knew it. I knew that it would work. And she says, sit still, my daughter. He's not going to rest until this is all taken care of. Now, for you to find out what happens, you're going to have to come back next week. It's going to be the last part of our series. I know you have the Bible at home. You can just read it. But come back next week and find out what happens. Does the other guy marry her? Is he going to marry her? Are they going to fight for her? What's going to happen? I don't know. You're going to have to come back. But what do we take away from this story? This story is messy. It's not straightforward. The plan was not perfect. There was lots of possibilities for failure. But there's one thing that I appreciate. There's many things, but one thing that I'll highlight that I appreciate about Ruth. She's a woman of action. She shows up and she sees what God is going to do. She continues to show up in the field every day. As she shows up, people begin to notice her. They observe her. They realize this is a woman of character. And this is my takeaway. As crazy as the plan was and as wild as the story is, I think we can learn from it that we can trust in God and show up for life. And this helps if you're dealing with anxiety. This helps if you're scared. This helps if you're uncertain. It makes perfect sense for all of us to be uncertain with the world that we're living in. So how do we function? Well, first of all, we trust God. Second, we show up. But how we show up is important. How did Ruth show up? How does Boaz show up? How does Naomi show up? They show up trusting in God, showing kindness and dedication to one another, and they show up in a way that honors God. Deception is not an option. Doing something illicit, illegal, not okay. They show up in their best version, trusting in God and following God's will. And that's all that can be expected of us. As this week is coming up, I encourage you, I challenge you, just show up each day. Just get out of bed, show up for work, show up for school, show up for whatever situation you're dealing with, and say, Lord, I want to see you do something special. Guide me, provide, do something, and I'll continue showing up. Can we do that? I think that's doable. In the same way that God shows up in the book of Ruth, and it's not super obvious, I believe He shows up in our lives. We get in trouble when we try to go outside of God's will to force things to happen the way we expect them to. But if we continue to show up, trusting in God, He will provide a way. Now, if you want extra notes, check out my blog. There's notes there in the original Hebrew, different interpretations, why I believe that this specific interpretation is the best one, and you can disagree with me and leave comments. I really enjoyed going through this story with you. I hope that as we go through this, you're also learning to go through the Bible, to slow down, place yourself in the shoes of the characters, and see, how is God working through all of this? And then we can think in our own lives as we look back, okay, how is God working through this messiness? And then we can choose each day, I'm going to show up, I'm going to trust God, and I'm going to refrain from going outside of His will to try to force things. I'm going to do the right thing, trust God, and keep showing up. If that's your desire, I invite you to bow your heads with me as we pray. Father in heaven, I am so grateful that we don't have to go through life on our own. So please bless us in your mercy, provide for us. Give us the courage, Lord, to show up each day, trusting in you and in your hand to bless and to guide and to provide. Please, Father, we cannot do this on our own. So I ask that you bless us and that you would also make us a blessing. And I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
I hope you are blessed by today's message. If you have any questions or would like someone to pray with you or for you, please feel free to contact us. May God bless you and keep you till we meet again.